I think that's probably true. You know, if I were to rate this escape on a scale of 1 to 10, it's got to be a 10. It worked. Nobody had any idea. It only came out later when somebody finally started talking. I do not believe that there was a credible threat on the president's life. The Israelis do things like this to us all the time. It's a manipulation tactic. And let me tell you a little bit about this Qatari 747. I've mentioned in past podcasts that I have friends in 5 of the 6 Persian Gulf royal families, and I stay in close touch with most of them. When the Qataris decided to gift this 747, it came in reaction to President Trump asking them, "Will you give me a free Boeing 747?" They were offended, according to this royal family member. But Arab culture is such that you can't deny a request for hospitality, right? Now, most people ask for a glass of water or a cup of tea, not a 747. But the Qataris couldn't say no to the request. But they were so offended that the president would come right out and ask for a free 747 that when they finally turned it over to the U.S. government, they made an announcement that it was a gift from the people of Qatar to the people of the United States, that it was not a gift to Donald Trump. Well, the president one-upped them a couple of weeks ago by announcing that when he completes his term, he's taking the 747 and parking it at what will be the Donald Trump Presidential Library, and it'll be on display there. So he will be the only president to ride in it. And let me tell you my own story. In November 1999, Bill Clinton came here to Athens. When a president comes to a country that you are assigned to, it doesn't matter if you are CIA or State Department or Commerce Department or Agriculture Department. They don't care who you work for. Everybody has to pitch in and help. Ambassador Nicholas Burns, whom I have always disliked and disrespected, on this one occasion did the right thing. He put all the jobs that needed to be done into a hat. And we all took turns picking our job out of a hat. I hit the lottery. And the job that I picked out of the hat was to be the note taker in President Clinton's meeting with the Greek Prime Minister, Defense Minister, and Foreign Minister. I've told that story many times. But here's the side to that story I've never told. When the meeting was done, President Clinton went to the basement, from the top floor to the basement of the Intercontinental Hotel, about 2 miles that way. And he gave a raucous speech, wildly popular speech to the Greek American Business Women's Association. From that speech, he then went to Athens Airport, the old airport at Ellinikon, and flew back to Washington. I went back to the embassy, and we had something called a hot wash, which is an after-action report. And that's when everybody gets together and you talk about absolutely every detail of the visit, what went right, what went wrong, what lessons learned. And the ambassador says to everybody, when he calls us all together, "Do you want to hear something crazy?" He said, just as the plane is taking off, the telephone inside Air Force One rang. And it was a random bomb threat. Someone here in Greece got the top secret phone number for the Air Force One telephone. Not to say Bill Clinton answered the phone. He didn't answer the phone. Some low-level aide answered the phone. But it was a bomb threat to blow up Air Force One. So, did the Israelis lie? Probably, but you have to take every shred of information like this seriously, just in case. For those of you who watch the show regularly or who know me personally, I love Greece almost more than any other place on earth. I've been coming here since I was 20 years old, right? 19 or 20, whatever. And I just love the place. I hope that someday I can buy a little apartment right here in this neighborhood and spend a few months a year maybe writing books on a balcony overlooking the beautiful Parthenon. I served here with the CIA from 1998 to 2000. It was the most dangerous tour I ever had in my career. And I served in Pakistan, I served in Afghanistan, I served in Iraq, and I never feared for my safety like I feared for it right here in Greece. When I was serving in Greece, the US government spent more money on security than it spent anywhere else on the planet, including Beirut, which was exploding at the time. And that is because of two groups. Neither group exists any longer. One, the more lethal of the two, was called Revolutionary Organization 17 November, Dekafta Noemvri. The other one was called Popular Revolutionary Struggle. 17 November carried out 27 assassinations between December 23rd, 1975 and April of 2000. The last assassination was of my next door neighbor, Brigadier General Stephen Saunders. He was the British Defense Attaché. I've told this story many times, but a couple of months after Stephen was assassinated, 17 November mailed a manifesto to a left-wing newspaper. This is something they usually did. They would either drop a manifesto at the site of the hit or leave it in a garbage can, call a leftist newspaper and tell them where to find it, or mail it to the newspaper. And usually they did it within a day or two of the hit. In the case of Stephen's assassination, they waited months. They waited until August of 2000. And they said in this manifesto, "Idameton megalokataskopos," we saw the big spy. But he was driving an armored car, and we knew he was armed. So we elected to carry out the revolutionary sentence on the war criminal Saunders. Now, Steve was not a war criminal. He had served in the British Army in Northern Ireland and in Yugoslavia, but he was a paper pusher. He was not a war criminal. But they had intended to kill me that day, and he was a softer target. He lived about 20 minutes after they shot him. They blew his right hand completely off at the wrist. They shot him in the chest with the same .45 that they used to carry out most of their assassinations. It was called the Welch 45 because it was used to kill CIA Station Chief Richard Welch on December 23rd, 1975. They also killed two U.S. defense attachés and a hapless, low-level African-American Air Force tech sergeant who was doing his laundry in the basement laundry room of his apartment building. They self-destructed in early 2000. One of the 17 November bombers was carrying a bomb in a brown paper bag in Piraeus, the port city of Athens. He was going to use it to blow up the car of a wealthy Greek ship owner. Instead, the bomb went off in his hands, blew his hands completely off, blew his right eye out, and he was bleeding to death. A policeman across the street heard the explosion. He ran over, tried to stanch the flow of the blood, and the bomber confessed that he was 17 November's bomber and that his two brothers were among the assassins. And he named all the members of the organization, and he gave the policeman the address of the safe house where all the weapons and the explosives were killed.
And then he lived. The cop actually saved his life. So the Greek counterterrorism police used that information to break the group within a day. The primary assassin, Dimitris Koufondinas, who was known as the Black Hand because everything he touched died, briefly escaped. He was found, of all places, on a nudist beach on one of the Greek islands and finally captured there. Most of the members of 17 November have been released from prison. The primary assassins, 5 of them, are still in prison. The founder of the group was released from prison on parole a month ago for good behavior. And there was such an uproar and an outcry that the Supreme Court reversed his release and he went back to prison. Greece is no longer dangerous like that. In fact, there's very little crime here of any kind, and I hate to even say this, but much of the crime comes from undocumented migrants and refugees who are, stealing to eat, to survive. That's a whole different issue we can talk about at some future time. There are still terrorist incidents, but they're not necessarily carried out by terrorist groups, so much as anarchist groups that just literally want to throw a grenade into the middle of the room and see what happens.
Those of us who lived in Greece in the 90s or in 2000 used to say that Athens was a wannabe Rome, that Athens was Rome 20 or 30 years earlier. Dirty, run down, not advanced. Now Rome wishes it was Athens. That's how great it is. Greece doesn't have those kinds of problems anymore, and that is a very, very good thing. I'll add one more little detail to my story, and I say this in my first book. One of the things that I'll never forgive myself for. I was shocked when I saw that manifesto that day. Shocked, because not only was I particularly good at surveillance and surveillance detection, I actually became a surveillance and surveillance detection instructor at the CIA. And I wrote a book called The CIA Insider's Guide to Surveillance and Surveillance Detection. And for years, I talked about how in the world they found me, and I never noticed them. The conclusion we came to was that Stephen was a media whore. He never saw a camera that he didn't want to jump right in front of and give a big toothy, interview. And then they noticed my license plate and noticed that it was an American Embassy license plate. And when they looked at my car, they saw it was armored, and they made the correct assumption that I was a CIA officer. That's the conclusion. Well, a month after Stephen's assassination, my mom and dad came to visit me here in Greece. I was married at the time, and I had two little boys. They were, let me think, they were 7 and 4 at the time. They're grown men now, of course. And I was standing in front of the house one day with my mom and the boys, and I said, "Mom, let me take a picture of you and the boys." And my mom crouched down and put her arms around the boys, and all three of them are smiling. Months passed. Now, this was the days when you had to get film developed, right? You had to take it to Kodachrome or whatever, the little hut that was in the parking lot of the grocery store. It was months before I got those pictures developed. And in the picture of my mom hugging the boys, there's a man sitting in a red Toyota, and he's just staring at the camera. He's looking right at the camera, and I never noticed him. And guess who he turned out to be? For days in a presidential race, they've got a Democratic senator, they've got a Republican senator. They have a Democratic governor right now. The last governor was Republican. The congressional delegation is divided between Democrats and Republicans. You just never know. It's all about turnout. And when the polling is bad just by its nature, it's just impossible to poll in a purple state. Well, all of this comes after Abdul Sayed in Michigan pulled off that narrow win in the Democratic Senate race. So far, DSA-aligned candidates, especially those who have been endorsed by Bernie Sanders, are pulling off major upsets, mostly. The thing is, and this is what is the most interesting to me, are we seeing the Democrats' version of the Tea Party? We might be. I don't know how many of you remember the election of 2010. I remember the election of 2010 because I was working on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee at the time, and the conventional wisdom we all believed was that the Republicans were going to win a ton of Senate seats, the Democrats were going to lose their majority, and John was going to lose his job, right? But the Tea Party, which has become the MAGA movement by and large, the Tea Party picked off a whole bunch of moderate Republican senators. And so in states where these moderate Republican senators were popular incumbents, the Democrats won. The Democrats won in Missouri that year. The Democrats won in Indiana that year. The Democrats won in Montana. And the Democrats won a race in Delaware, Joe Biden's old Senate seat, that they were predicted to lose. And so I'm wondering if we're seeing the same thing now among Democrats, where DSA-aligned candidates, pretty hard left by DNC standards, are picking off incumbents only to then lose to moderate Republicans in the general election, other than Lindsey Graham's sister. And I'll tell you what, Lindsey Graham just died, like the other day, and the Defense Department already named a military base after him called Joint Base Lindsey Graham. Nice, huh? So, listen, in politics so far, 10 U.S. House members have lost their primaries. 10. That is the most since 1970. You remember that mantra from the famous film Network? I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take this anymore. That's what the American voters are saying. So until next time, actually, you know what? I'll tell you. Our next episode, I'm going to film from Cairo, Egypt. And I hope I have a good view to show you from there. Thanks for joining us. Please find my other podcast. It's called John Kiriakou's Dead Drop. It's on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We're also on X, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and pretty much everywhere else. Thanks again for helping us by liking, subscribing, commenting, making recommendations. It really means a lot to me. We'll see you next time.